I hope you all enjoy this glorious day. We're going to open up the decks outside as well soon, but please enjoy. And first up is Andrew from Strider DAO.
Hello? I think I have a microphone on my head. Is it working? Yeah. All right, great. Well, thanks so much for having me, Peter and 1KX. This is a really cool event. A lot of cool people excited to share. This worked a second ago, I swear to God. Do it. Oh, all right, I'll just turn around my laptop. No, I'm kidding. Do we know what happened? Yeah, I just plugged it in. All right. Saying no signal. No. Display. Detect. It's saying no signal. Should I restart? There it goes. It's just that it's on a different screen entirely. So now you just have my dumb background. It's from Spaceballs. It's you don't know Spaceballs? Okay. Anyone who doesn't know Spaceballs that's what we're doing tonight. We're gonna watch Spaceballs. All right. All right. So this is like really hard to do. What the fuck? Okay, here we go. Oh my God. There we go. All right. We'll get started. So, I am Andrew Green. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Strider DAO. What work have I done? I have done community, brand building, digital marketing, and IP extensions at Electronic Arts, Atari, Take-Two Interactive. The coolest game I ever worked on in the past in that time was Dead Space. I launched Dead Space and Dead Space 2, which was really exciting. We did some really cool IP extensions for that, like a comic book and an animated film and an online like Myst type game that went along with it. After everything became data-driven in marketing, I was like, I don't want to be accountable. So I went over to product because I thought that would be a lot cooler to leverage data and be more creative there. I started at this Canvas games company called Lockups. Amazing logo, by the way. It was one of the first Canvas games companies that wasn't Zynga that had a really big hit. I cut my teeth there, and then I went over to TinyCo, where I led the studio and Greenlight, and we did some big games like Family Guy: The Quest for Stuff, and I was the game director initially on Harry Potter: Hogwarts Mystery, where we actually first Harry Potter free-to-play game, first Harry Potter mobile game, first time a studio actually was able to build lore for the Harry Potter universe. We wrote the 10 years in between Harry getting zapped and then going to school, and J.K. Rowling, like I met her once, which was really exciting. Harry Potter was a great game. Jam City bought the studio. I also did a HTML5 game startup called Knock Knock that's still going and has a project called ViWorlds right now. And after that, I went into games investing at Andreessen Horowitz, where I helped them start the games practice. And then I kind of fell down the crypto rabbit hole for a second time. I'm Bitcoin class of 2017, and then kind of got very excited about the space, stayed in touch with a lot of folks who were building in it, came up with the idea for Strider, and here we are today. And 1KX, invested in us, and we could not have a better partner in crime here. So today I'm talking about like incentives for game developers. And first, I feel like I can't do anything without context. And so I'm going to start with a brief history of games work incentives. Atari, they were winning with the Atari 2600, making tons of money. And game developers wouldn't get any royalties, wouldn't get their names on the boxes. And Nolan Bushnell was known to be really cool, even though it was a really like awful kind of misogynistic, drug-fueled hot tub environment there. After he got fired and Warner Brothers bought the company, a bunch of developers kind of mutinied. They were like, we saw how much money you're making off of our games. One game developer actually generated $20 million in revenue, which today would be $88 million in revenue, personally, himself as the sole artist, designer, coder on a game, made $88 million for the company, and his salary that year was $20,000 or $94,000 adjusted. And when they went to the CEO at the time, Ray Kossler, he said, "You are no more important to Atari than the person on the assembly line who puts the cartridges in the box." And, you know, creatives don't really like to hear that kind of thing, so they left and started this company called Activision. And what's funny, though, if you think about it, like, they had to start their own company in order to be remunerated for amazing work that they were doing. You shouldn't have to do that, in my opinion. And when they left, they raised venture capital money from Sutter Ventures in 1979, I think this was, and they raised less than $1 million, $800,000, which is like $3.4 million today, and they gave the VCs 58% of the company. Like, those are bad valuations if you think about it in today's. But Activision saw such great, such great success that they created this huge glut of VC-backed games companies. And we all know, and the remuneration that they were always seeking for developers, we know how that ended. If you know that's Bobby Kotick, and he loves money, and I think that the incentive structures at Activision are great, but they're probably not as good as they could be. So we then go to the early PC and console era, which is essentially just like driven by publishers and distributors, but because it's ruled by retail. You can't get product to your audience unless someone buys it at a store. So anyone who has distribution into the retail stores, they own the means of distribution, and therefore they can basically like strong arm any developer into taking essentially what is like, most developers were lucky to have 25% cuts on their games during this era. This is all your favorite games, during Nintendo, Genesis, even up to Dreamcast. But as prices, as the cost of games to make started to increase, there was all this massive consolidation until the real sea change was around digital distribution. Really the birth of indie, AAA, and AA. Digital distribution allowed smaller teams to make smaller games but generate sizable profits, and they didn't have to have that like retail stronghold where people needed to sell content into the stores. They can go direct digitally via Valve, via Steam, via Xbox Live Arcade, and via PlayStation Network. So now publishers had way less to do, so the deals got better, and because people needed more and more content, the deals kept getting better and better. And and now we have Game Pass, where you need so much content that it's basically Netflix, but the models are changing. Instead of it being a purchasing model where you as a developer are making money based on your the amount of games you sell, now it's based on the amount of minutes and sessions played in your games, which are also changing the way that your profits are, which then trickle down to what type of incentives are actually given to game developers. And now we've entered an era that I will just call the talent wars. And now, basically, you have, I'll go into all the actual compensation structures for each of the different places, but whereas AA and AAA and Indie have a potential for a big upside because they're usually smaller teams, if there's a lot of profits, they can do good profit sharing models, which a lot of people are doing. But interestingly, there's a lot of good careers now, especially if you're an engineer or a product manager. Unfortunately, it's just those two roles seem to be the most. I think technical artist, also a couple others. But if you work at a contemporary AAA company or at a work, or if you own a work for hire studio, or if you work at a AAA mobile studio, some of these people are making like $1 million a year via like their salaries and RSUs in America right now. So like EA is essentially just like pay whatever. Activision's like pay whatever. Microsoft's like pay whatever, and just keep them. We don't even know if these employees are good. We don't even know. We don't even care if these employees are good. We don't even know if they're worth this much. But it's good. It is good that people are being paid more, at least, and that people are recognizing that game development talent is extremely rare, extremely awesome, and that like having these people as part of your teams is going to yield all the value. And so between the digital kind of revolution and the talent wars, you have much better incentive structures than you've ever had before. So what do those look like? In AAA, console, and mobile, as I was just saying, RSUs, which are restricted share units, so equity, you just kind of get dispersed this like EA shares as part of your overall comp package. They give you a bonus based on the overall revenue of your group, your title, your titles, and the publisher. Platforms are, taking 30% cuts on a lot of these games, so it's squeezing a little bit of the margin. But this competitive salary area in AAA, console, and mobile is pretty incredible. In AA and AAA, publishers are taking about 50% off the top, and distributors are and distribution is taking 15 to 30%. That's if your game gets financed by a publisher. So if you're a small team and you're like, we need that publishing power and we need financing to actually finish our game, they'll take half of your game's revenue. And that's way better than what it used to be, because it can actually tranche up to like 70% for the developer based on success. There are much lower salaries in AA and AAA because these are all startup studios. But because you think people can have either equity shares in the company or this profit sharing upside, it makes it like potentially a better deal. And you don't have to work at a giant corporation, which a lot of people don't want to work for. They want to work for small teams that ship games. There's a lot of people that do want to work in corporations and kind of be a bit more obfuscated and kind of shift around credit and blame and kind of hang out a bit more. But it depends on kind of what type of work environment you're seeking and what type of compensation structure. And then for indies, it's all over the place. But again, publishers usually taking 50% off the top with financing. Same as AA. Some indies don't really have any cash, hugely cash strapped, and mostly driven by profit sharing. So I've been talking a lot about profit sharing. So what is profit sharing? There is no standard for profit sharing today in games at all. Some people base literally on your shareholder equity. Some people make it kind of time and role based, where they have like the amount of time that passes in a certain role, you kind of accrue profit sharing shares, so that like if you move off of a game and that game is making money into live ops for like years and years, you still maintain your share as long as you're with the company for that profit sharing. There's then the age-old exec pool and employee pool, where the exec pool is like all of it and the employee pool is like none of it. And then you could come up with your own weird thing. I had a really prolific game developer tell me that most profit sharing is just whatever your cis white male way of divvying up the profit is. And I was like, that's really interesting. So I think there's still like a lot of problems for how companies create their profit sharing models, and it's probably usually going to be based on who's leading the company and do they actually want fairness. And do they have integrity, right? And that comes down to like individuals, which is a really weird thing, because you put a lot of time, you put a lot of effort into your work, and now you have to like really kind of trust that you're going to get back what you put in. And I will tell you, in a lot of structures that I've worked in traditional equity-based companies and startups, they don't tell you a lot about what your equity is worth. They don't teach you about vesting schedules. They don't tell you about like what type of percentage your equity is worth. They want you to know as little as possible so they can like have as much equity available for the people that they believe need to have the most incentives. So there's still a lot of, and like I can't say that's evil or like that's bad. I just don't think we've thought through all of this, or that we've had the models available to do this, and or we have to rely on people that have a lot of integrity or want there to be like really cool remuneration structures within their companies. So what are we figuring out at Strider? Like, as you can see, I have some emotions around some of this stuff. I'm trying to keep that at bay here and keep this more, just having a talk. But so why I started Strider with our co-founders is because there's a lot that is messed up, and there's a lot of problems. So problem one is lockups. So workers are time locked and opportunity locked right now in normal kind of corporate structures. You can only work for that company, and they own your IP. And not only that, like if you want to advise or moonlight or whatever, you have to go like submit like a approval to them, and and then they have to approve that, or and you have to like also assign rights for IP when you join a company. And like we need to improve this lockup structure, where a major improvement would be that people can work on whatever amount of projects their time allows, optimize for their own personal goals, whether that's learning, great team dynamics, upside, stability. Like both teams and workers should be allowed to sniff each other's butts longer and figure out, do they want to be on the project long term? Do they feel like this team has their shit together? Is the vision aligned with like what they want to work on? The worker really needs to be put more at the forefront of like being able to choose their own destiny and not be locked in. We also believe that the workers should ensure there should always be clear and transparent upside in any role. Like if you're building foundational IP, you should have at least some small piece of upside, whether that, the next point being also a tiny piece of IP sharing. So it's not just that you get upside on profit sharing or upside on the tokens when they moon, but you should also have a piece of the actual underlying intellectual property that you're building. Another problem is what I call margin as a service, where you have work for hire aggregators all over the world, mostly in countries mostly in places like Latin America, Pakistan, India, places in China, Eastern Europe, Russia, Southeast Asia, where they can basically get cheaper labor. They try to standardize and flatten the overall margin of work, and then they sell that margin to developers that need bench. And like, what a great improvement here would be that instead of you going to that aggregator who takes a nice profit for themselves, sells the rest of the margin and flattens everyone else's wages, doesn't provide them upside, is have just more available workers that are credentialed globally that can have direct access to projects on par with current market value globally, so that you can standardize more of a global rate. And yes, your costs will go up, but you also should have access to more people to work, and that they will have a better life, and that you will have more workers to work with. And then you're also allowing workers into projects that are high value projects that they could show their work and try to gain a foothold in like more of a meritocracy by creating this model, rather than me needing to know someone, but like creating more of an environment of submissions where you could find incredible talent anywhere, which I believe does exist. I don't know why this isn't switching. Why aren't you switching? It didn't freeze. Good. Let's go back to this. All right. So there are tons of issues to solve in governance, payment, reputation, all of these things to actually start to build on to improve the markets that we talked about. So I'm going to share one slide with a lot of ideas on it, and then we're just going to like have a conversation where everyone's going to not everyone's gonna, but everyone can feel free to start to just throw darts at the ideas that I'm going to put up here, which I think would be fun. What are the problems with the model that I'm about to show you? Would be a fun way of thinking about it. But a model for decentralized game production. At Strider, like, we believe that full open source is too messy to actually guardrail and create like really good production practices even within a community. So we believe that there should be vision holder governance that stays small and breaks into committees. And what they do is they create the initial vision and story Bible. They manage a cadence of NFT drops, determine the community guardrails and like SLAs for work, which I'll show you how that work will happen. They canonize content, validate and pay for work, and help manage the treasury. And the work product that kind of comes out to the market from this is NFT drops, which are ownable, story-rich assets. They introduce worlds and characters. They provide community privileges. Everyone knows how NFTs work. They also can be early methods of gameplay, which we're thinking of. So you don't have to like do concept and pre-pro. As is happening in the market right now, you can drop like earlier stages of gameplay, like more either crafting loops or things that fall into simulation loops that work with the NFTs well, are lower fidelity, but get people kind of already in your world and working. The other thing that we think isn't being leveraged enough that we're really excited about is the concept of artifacts. And these are shareable, memeable assets for social and for the community specifically. And they basically create mining opportunities for idea and meme generation. So what we're talking about is you're dropping NFTs that are canonized, but then you're dropping a bunch of artifacts that are kind of not, and are just like story elements, character elements, world elements that are explorable, and people are trying to parse out and figure out what is happening in this world right now. What is happening? It's kind of like a prompt that a dungeon master would give you. So it's like, here's what's happening in this world right now, but you make it a little bit vague and let the community mine and create groups to figure out what's happening. They're positing things, and they're also coming up with ideas because you're prompting them to like have their own creativity, and you want to know where the world's going next. That provides like a lot of the engagement and like work to, where work can kind of blossom and memes can blossom and people's own like visions together can like, where they're playing kind of like a mini D&D session around your lore. And then, of course, there's the actual structure of bounties and contests. So bounties are like, there's work that needs to be done. We're going to remunerate you for that work. And contests are more time-capped work where a bunch of teams or individuals can get together and submit work in a sprint and be kind of rewarded points over the course of that sprint, and then the winner of that work gets canonized. There's obviously a treasury that's holding all of the funds that will go back into developing content for the game and continuing to build the game. And then obviously there's the community and the individuals who are investing in the NFTs, making their own artifacts and memes, submitting proposals for the game lore and other things that you're creating, casting votes, earning royalties. They also can break into work groups that are, basically work teams or sub teams that are like building lore for the game. They could even be their own sub DAOs that can pool their own resources together and pool their own resources from the game in like a traditional guild model. And essentially what happens is you create this ladder based on contribution where a new member can then have more attributes added to their NFT or their token that allows them voting to get more and more voting privileges and more access to more and more voting privileges until eventually they actually could find a place in the vision team at the top, working on all of the different aspects of the game and breaking into a committee and running aspects of the game in either full product development or live operations. So this is a model that we've been playing around with and working with. There's a bunch of different things that are going to be broken in it, but we're really excited about deploying it on an upcoming project that we're working on, and we have a really great lore wrapper for it. So I think we're just going to learn a lot in general. So obviously we have a lot of open questions for this work. Do you have questions? Yes. Oh wait, yeah. There might be a microphone coming your way.
Hi, good morning. With that structure that you're talking about in game development, what are your thoughts around community management? Because oftentimes the patience of an NFT holder is not long enough to give the game time to develop and grow.
Oh yeah, I have a microphone on my face. That's a great question. So I think that as we've seen in live ops, so I come from both a console and a mobile live ops background, And I think the way that you manage that is, well, one, good community management, I think which is a whole other presentation. But I think two is, think about launching your game. Like when we would launch a game, when we're launching our initial project, we're thinking about like as if live operations, like worldwide ship, happens on day one. We have a cadence of content that's backlogged already, right? So like we already have like 3 to 6 months of content that's backlogged, and then we have development on content that aligns with features at the same time. And that's one big thing that's missing in PFP communities that are trying to push to a game and a lot of other things right now, is that they don't actually know how to do ongoing engagement. And what you're doing is essentially you're like spring loading your roadmap by, instead of like shipping a PFP, seeing if people are interested in that, and then starting to figure out your roadmap, you actually build your roadmap and you deploy so that you actually can build momentum and engagement. Doesn't mean if your PFP doesn't sell out in day one, or if your initial drop isn't like the biggest hit in the world, that's okay if you believe in it. You should continue to build engagement content and build your community and show value over time, right? And I think that's another big issue right now is a lot of folks are trying to like really focus on like big push, big hype, big collectors, big money, not really having that secondary engagement perspective. There are some game teams that I think are doing it right that come from traditional gaming, but they're still doing too much top-down kind of, here's the vision that we're doing, this is what the game is going to be, and trying to kind of sell that roadmap, and leads to a lot of the problems that you're talking about where there's not a lot of engagement in between. But here, we're giving them work, we're giving them new content, we're giving them new artifacts, and we're prompting them in more of like a ongoing narrative. So hopefully we feel like that will fix the engagement problem. Any other questions? Oh, cool.
Hi. In the model you showed before, are the individuals and work groups in any way employed? Is there salaries there, or is it just open to anyone to come and?
Yeah, it's a great question. So everyone that's in the governance and the kind of the vision holder pool in this model would be paid with stables, and they'd have a variety of remuneration. So the way we kind of like look at this cascading remuneration, which is like your stables are your salary, potentially there's a work token, the game token, if there is one, you have a share of that, and then there is also profit sharing, which is standardized. So if you're at a certain point in the contribution, by the way, we haven't figured this out totally, so I'm kind of pulling some of this out of my butt, but the basic idea is in this case where we're kind of pre-financing a big portion of this game, that we're kind of taking 30% off the top, which is what would usually be reserved for investors and be reserved for the team, the management team or whatever. We're giving the other 70% to anyone who works on the game. Like, so 70% of all upside, of all tokens, of everything goes to the studio in this case to continue to build